Warning, this episode may contain disturbing content, soothing narration, and mild existential dread. Basically, murder ASMR for stressed professionals. Listener discretion is advised. Hell, it might be necessary.
3 counts of capital murder. That's what the jury returned when they said Garland, Butch Martin, of Midland, Texas, was guilty of killing his girlfriend, Marcia Poole, and her 2 children, 3-year-old Brady and 1-year-old Kristin. The state built what looked like a strong case. Friends and family took the stand and described verbal abuse, threats, and allegations of physical violence. Fire investigators testified to the jury in the language of scientific certainty. And finally, the medical examiner and a forensic anthropologist told the jury that Marcia and Brady suffered blunt force trauma before the fire, suggesting that they were intentionally incapacitated before Butch set the blaze. But what about the defense? What was Butch's version of events? And what changed 24 years later to earn him an exoneration? Was this a bad investigation? Were witnesses lying? Was it folklore dressed up as forensic science? Or was it something far more common, an honest misunderstanding rooted in ignorance and outdated methodology? And here's the uncomfortable truth. There is 0 credible evidence that this fire was arson. And this is not the first time we've seen that. We saw it in the Cameron Todd Willingham case, the Angela Garcia case, the Juwan Deering case, the Hantak Lee case, and the Christine Bunch case, and in countless others that you haven't heard us talk about yet. Because wrongful arson convictions don't always make headlines, but they do make felons. I cannot tell you how many accused arsonists sat in a courtroom trying to defend themselves against mythology that collapsed the moment it met modern fire science. I cannot tell you how many lives were ruined because of junk forensic practices masquerading as expertise, but I can tell you that it was too many. Because once we strip away the folklore and examine only the evidence, what remains is little more than the allegation that Butch Martin and Marcia had a tumultuous relationship. Is that enough to put a man away for 3 counts of capital murder? An appellate court said no. I say no. But this show isn't really about what I think. It's about giving you the facts so you can decide what you think. This is part 2, the conclusion of the folklore that convicted Butch Martin, right now on Crime to Burn. Welcome to Crime to Burn, where we explore the dark city landscape where true crime intersects with arson and criminal negligence. Join us as we sift through the ashes to bring you the story of what really happened. I'm April, a fire protection engineer, former firefighter, and your friendly neighborhood fire science myth buster.
And I'm the little engine that could, but didn't really want to.
Thanks for joining us this week. Truly, we are stoked to have you. And we need one very important and totally free favor from each of you. Head on over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify and leave us a 5-star rating, a written review, and if the episode allows it, an episode comment. Because here's the deal, we are a small fish in a very saturated pond, and without those reviews, we cannot get traction against those big name shows with publicists and advertising budgets. I spend our money on court records so that I can bring you detailed cases filled with facts that you will not get from a casual Google search. But to keep doing that, I need you to help pump us up. This podcast is essentially a full-time job, only it doesn't pay. In fact, I just paid $1,645 for court records for one case, just one. Over $1,500, and all I'm asking in return is 5-star reviews. Seriously, it matters more than you know. Normally, I would shout out everyone who left reviews this week, but we are recording this episode early due to a death in the family, so I don't know yet who you are, but we will celebrate you properly next week. If you want to support the show in other ways, consider grabbing some Crime to Burn merch. The link to our spread shop is in the show notes. And if you want to help us pay for those insanely expensive court records while getting every episode ad-free, you can head on over to our Patreon and sign up. That link is also in the show notes.
Plus, you can join a really cool cult.
Finally, I have been slacking on social media because life has been a lot. But when we do post, it would help us enormously if you'd like, comment, and share our stuff on Facebook, X, TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. Or make your own post about why you love the show. That's how people find us, which would be, frankly, pretty groovy. And don't forget, you can send us your fire stories, case suggestions, feedback, and yes, your feet pictures for us to sell on the dark web to offset the cost of court records at crimetoburn@gmail.com. Just please remember to include a release form with your feet pics. We can't have legal issues on top of all of this.
Don't send us feet pics. Don't listen to this lady. She has problems.
Now, last week we brought you part 1 of the Butch Martin case, and I want to remind you that you can hear an amazing interview with Butch's Innocence Project lawyer on the Fearless podcast produced by Texas Tech, and you can hear Butch's story in his own words on the Wrongful Conviction podcast. The links are in last week's show notes. Last week we gave you the prosecution's narrative, the fire science, the pathology, and the relationship testimony that convinced a jury that Butch Martin was a domestic abuser who murdered his family and burned down the evidence. If that was the only version of the story you ever heard, I don't think it's unreasonable that you would lean toward believing he was guilty. A lot of people did. Whether those negative character descriptions were fair or weaponized, whether they were true, partially true, or deeply embellished, I genuinely do not know. What I do know is that hearing Butch speak on the Wrongful Conviction podcast paints a wildly different picture of his relationship with Marcia, and I cannot adjudicate which human version is correct.
Man, you and your big words. Look at your big brain.
But what I can adjudicate is the fire science. And folks, that science was bad. Not evil conspiracy bad, but folklore bad. The kind of bad that happens when people are trained in fire investigation based on gut feelings and campfire wisdom instead of empirical testing. So today we're going to talk about the defense, the appellate court, and the question that matters most: was there actually a murder? Let's start with Butch Martin's defense. He claimed that the fire was accidental and happened while he was not at home. He came back, found his house on fire, and physically injured himself trying to reach Marcia and the kids, even sprinting more than a mile back to the house after being cuffed and removed for his own safety. The defense began by addressing the smell testimony. Paramedics on scene testified that they smelled something on Martin that reminded them of lighter fluid. But paramedics weren't the only people within sniffing distance of Butch that night. Far from it. Multiple other witnesses had close physical contact with him, and none of them reported smelling anything unusual on his body or clothing. Then the defense challenged the state's fire experts.
How many people just sniff everybody they come in contact with and then remember that?
Yeah, I don't know. So I don't think that the smell defense was very strong.
I try to forget most people I smell.
Yeah, I don't usually walk up to people and take a big whiff. But I understand what they're saying, that he was obviously in the smoke from the fire for a long time. And to me, burning smells from a house fire can have a chemical odor to them.
Absolutely. Or whatever, electrical insulation.
Yeah.
That's a really distinct smell and stuff like that.
So I think that the smell part of the prosecution's case was weak to begin with, but I think if the jury bought it as credible, I don't think that somebody else saying, well, I didn't smell anything, would carry a lot of weight for a jury.
Yeah.
Then the defense challenged the state's fire experts. The prosecution's key fire expert was a man named John Korn.
No, I'm not doing it.
We're about to shuck the corn. He was a lab director for Armstrong Laboratories in Arlington, Texas, a firm that specialized in detecting accelerants from fire debris samples. Now, Korn tested debris from the scene and reported the presence of norpar, which is associated with lamp oils, and also of deparaffinated kerosene, which he connected to charcoal lighter fluid. Korn testified that while norpar can appear in pesticides, he would have detected other chemical markers if pesticides were the source. And he emphasized that neither norpar nor deparaffinated kerosene was used in carpets, plastics, or any other common household products. So the defense brought in an expert from Forensic and Scientific Testing of Atlanta who disputed Korn's assertions. Their expert testified that he was not at all surprised by the presence of norpar and deparaffinated kerosene because they were prevalent in hundreds of household products. Then in court, Korn was confronted with a list of more than 200 product patents for products that contain norpar, and yet he still sat on the stand and insisted the only reasonable source for his findings were lamp oil or lighter fluid.
He's Korn. He's got the juice.
He's more of a lumpy knob.
He's a big lump with knobs.
Now, what the defense did not do is also important. They did not dispute the laboratory findings themselves. They never requested the underlying chromatograph data. They didn't request independent retesting of the samples. And those omissions later became grounds for some of Martin's early appeals which were denied.
You know what he said in response to all that, though?
What?
He said, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing.
You've upset the dog greatly.
Sorry, man. I'm on a corn kick now.
The dog is not a fan of corn. But here's the catch, and it didn't come out until the exoneration proceedings years later. Two of the most respected fire investigation experts in America reviewed this case when the Innocence Project got involved. They were Mr. John Lentini and Dr. Gerald Hurst. If you know fire investigation, those names should hit like cymbals.
Lentini in the house!
Lentini is, in my humble opinion, essentially the godfather of modern fire investigation science. And Hurst was a brilliant chemist and investigator whose work was pivotal in many cases, including the Cameron Todd Willingham case, which we've already covered. Now, in a 2002 affidavit, Dr. Hurst wrote, "While it is true that Norpar can be used in lamp oil, it is equally true that most lamp oils are not Norpar." And Martin's Innocence Project attorney explained in her Fearless podcast interview that the lamp oils that contained Norpar weren't even available for sale in the United States at the time of the fire. It did exist in parts of Europe, but this was 1998. You didn't hop on Amazon and get a bottle of Norwegian lamp oil on 2-day Prime delivery. Yet
I don't know what the hell you just said, but that sounded awesome. Sounded like you knew what you were talking about.
So what they're saying is that Norpar was used in certain lamp oils, but none of those lamp oils were for sale in the United States. And this was 1998, so it's not like...
So you'd have to like smuggle it in? Or
you would have had to like travel overseas and get it, or have somebody overseas ship it to you.
In their butt?
And it's not... the internet wasn't what it is today, so it's not like you could just jump online and order stuff from overseas.
You didn't have it on Amazon?
Nah. Amazon was still books in 98.
I remember.
So no one explained how Butch Martin, a guy from Midland who met his girlfriend at a cockfight, was supposedly importing boutique European lamp oil as part of a murder plot. Hurst also pointed out that while isoparaffins are present in charcoal lighter fluids, their primary uses are in a very long list of other common household items, and he provided a list of 25 such products and, to put it politely, shredded corn's conclusion.
He shredded your corn.
In short, Dr. Hurst tore apart the lab work, and yes, he absolutely shucked the corn. I'm sorry.
Oh, man.
He called the chemical analysis in this case deeply flawed, and I think that was putting it nicely. And now let's throw in some April conjectures here. Martin was gone from his house for approximately 30 minutes. Now, house fires move fast, and fires involving accelerants can move even faster. We also know from witness reports that Kristin's bedroom flashed over the moment Butch returned and broke the window, more than 30 minutes after the fire had started. Flashover requires high heat, and it does not wait around for half an hour. Here's where the timeline bothers me. If the state's theory is correct, that this was an intentional accelerant-ignited fire, then we would expect what fire investigators call a ventilation-limited fast-growth fire. In other words, we would have ignition leading to rapid flaming combustion, which would result in very high heat buildup, where the windows would fail, and that would introduce the oxygen to trigger flashover. That sequence does not take 30 minutes in a house fire. Once flaming ignition occurred in a furnished compartment, flashover can occur in as little as 3 to 5 minutes, sometimes even faster depending on the fuel load and ventilation. And modern homes are full of high heat release rate synthetics. Things like upholstery, carpet, mattress foam, plastics. All of it burns extremely hot and extremely fast. What we actually see here, a house that was still intact enough for Kristin's room to flash upon window breakage 30 minutes after supposed ignition, reads more like a slow smoldering oxygen-limited fire that had not yet self-vented. And that can happen in things like electrical fire scenarios, smoldering bedding, cigarettes, heater malfunctions. So here is my opinion, and I'm framing this as an opinion because the ignition source was never definitively identified. If this fire had been started with a volatile accelerant and open flame, we would not expect it to still be in a pre-flashover, fully intact compartment state 30 minutes later. The windows in Kristin's room likely would have already failed from the heat. Flashover would have occurred earlier, and the fire would have been visibly venting long before Martin pulled up. But what we see instead, delayed flashover triggered by the breaking of a window, is much more compatible with a slow-growing ventilation-limited fire, not an accelerant-driven fast-growth arson fire. Again, that is my professional interpretation of the timeline based on fire science. It is not proof of innocence.
This fire's a grower, not a shower.
It's just that the fire behavior that witnesses described doesn't match the physics of the fire the state alleged. So if the fire was not intentionally set, what could have caused it? After all, the state's fire investigator testified that he had ruled out all accidental causes. But did he? Let's start with the obvious elephant in the room, these so-called pore patterns he said he identified in the master bedroom. And y'all, when I die, they're gonna have to engrave this on my tombstone. Irregular burn patterns are not proof of pore patterns, especially in a structure that goes to flashover. Because that myth has ruined so many lives. We have repeatedly demonstrated in controlled fire tests, no accelerants, just normal household contents, that once a fire goes to flashover, you can produce identical, irregular, puddle-shaped, heavy char patterns on floors that look exactly like pore patterns. NFPA-aligned is explicit about this. Irregular burn patterns cannot be taken as proof of accelerant, period, end of story. Put it on my gravestone. So if the investigator anchored the origin on those patterns, that's already shaky. But then it gets worse. Because one of the first eyewitnesses reported that they initially saw fire burning on the back porch. Conveniently, on that back porch sat a deep freezer, plugged into an indoor-rated extension cord that had been run through either a window or a door to reach an outlet inside.
Hey, stop that, man. You're drawing too many amps when that thing kicks its compressor on. Knock it off.
That is not great for all the reasons my co-host just explained. Now here's where folklore meets facepalm. The investigator testified that he ruled out the extension cord as a cause because he believed the fire started in the bedroom based on those pore patterns. And then he threw out the extension cord. Didn't need it. Ruled it out. Nobody ever needed to look at it again.
So is he just dumb, or does he have like some ulterior motive?
I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt and say he's dumb.
Fair enough.
So the extension cord was gone, with no additional testing, no measurements, no photos of the damage, and no chance for peer review. No opportunity for later experts to evaluate it. It's hard to overstate how scientifically irresponsible that was. When you rule something out, you document why. You don't literally discard the only physical evidence that could support or contradict your conclusion. And here's where the physics gets really loud. Meteorological data from that night recorded sustained winds around 40 miles per hour. That is not a gentle breeze, that is a leaf-blowing, hat-stealing, trash-can-tipping wind. And it matters because it was blowing directly at the back porch of the house. So under the prosecution's theory, the fire starts in the master bedroom and it intensifies, and then somehow spreads outside to the porch against a 40-mile-per-hour wind, and then engulfs the porch before kindly returning to the interior to fully involve the rest of the house.
They paid the fire off to act that way.
This requires the fire to violate basic fluid dynamics. What witnesses actually reported was a large fire on the back porch with no obvious heavy fire involvement inside the house yet. Fire does not decide to sprint against a 40-mile-per-hour headwind and then politely turn around and burn the rest of the house later. But if the ignition started on the porch, those observations suddenly make perfect sense. The extension cord fails quietly, freezers cycle on and off and draw surge current. A failing conductor arcs or overheats, combustible materials nearby ignite, and then the wind feeds those flames directly toward the house. By the time the interior involvement becomes visible, the porch is already going up like a blowtorch. So what does that mean? It means the one thing on the porch that perfectly explains the localized early fire that was observed by witnesses, the delayed interior involvement, behavior consistent with the slow-growing origin, and physics consistent with where the 40-mile-per-hour winds were actually pointed that night, was also the one piece of evidence the investigator discarded. That isn't conspiracy, that's bad procedure, and it's exactly the kind of procedural failure that NFPA 921 was created to prevent. But wait, What about the forensic anthropologist who said Marcia and Brady were punched, knocked out, and that blunt force trauma happened before the fire started? Well, that's not exactly how all that unfolded. Let's rewind. The original medical examiner, Dr. David Hoblet, ruled the deaths the result of smoke inhalation. He noted soot in the airways, elevated carbon monoxide levels, and no evidence of blunt force trauma. Then, the state had all 3 bodies exhumed so a forensic anthropologist could examine them. And after that examination, Hoblet changed his findings. Why? Well, because the forensic anthropologist reportedly suggested to him something along the lines of, hey, if there's brain swelling, that can happen from blunt force trauma. And suddenly the official narrative became Marcia and Brady had blunt force trauma, and Kristin didn't, and they explained it by saying she didn't need to be punched because she was already trapped in her crib. That was the state's logic. Except there are a few glaring problems. Brain swelling or cerebral edema does not prove someone was punched. It can occur due to hypoxia, something that happens in a fire. Carbon monoxide exposure, also something that happens in a fire. Elevated body temperature, something that happens in a fire.
No.
Global ischemia, cardiac arrest, something that happens to people that die in fires. And inhalation injuries, also something that happens to people in fires. So Marcia, little Brady, and Kristin were confirmed to have had carbon monoxide in their blood, soot in their airways, and significant heat exposure. In other words, they had multiple physiological pathways capable of causing swelling without anyone having to throw a single punch. Brain swelling is a result, not a diagnosis. The expert that the state leaned on for this blunt force trauma assessment was a forensic anthropologist. And anthropologists are highly trained, highly valuable experts, but their domain is skeletal remains. They do fracture analysis, bone trauma interpretation, peri-mortem versus post-mortem injury, and skeletal identification. They do not diagnose brain edema, carbon monoxide effects, hypoxia, or soft tissue trauma. That requires forensic pathology, not anthropology. Having a forensic anthropologist diagnose brain swelling is like having your dentist perform your annual pap smear. Absolutely the wrong specialty.
But you should have your gynecologist check your teeth.
If you actually punch someone in the head hard enough to knock them unconscious, you might expect focal injuries like skull fractures, subdural, epidural hematomas, scalp hematomas, or contusions. But none of that was documented. There was no skull evidence to support the anthropologist's theory, yet the jury heard brain swelling equals punching, and that was that. And then there's the problem of the medical examiner's credibility. You see, Dr. David Hoblet, the medical examiner who revised his findings after the exhumations, later had his medical license revoked and was convicted in connection with operating an illegal pill mill. There are also indications that he may have continued practicing medicine afterwards despite having lost his license, although I can't confirm or deny those. Whether that license may have later been reinstated is unclear, but it does raise eyebrows. But does that automatically make his earlier forensic opinions wrong? No. But it does raise legitimate questions about his professional rigor, judgment, and ethical standards.
I think it's the wrongness of it that makes it wrong.
And the appellate court pays attention to that kind of thing. So the bottom line is, the anthropologist wasn't qualified to diagnose soft tissue pathology. The ME had originally found no trauma. The brain swelling was nonspecific and entirely consistent with fire physiology. There were no skeletal trauma issues brought forth in any of the documentation I could find to support any kind of physical assault allegations. And Kristin, who did not show any swelling in the brain, that can be absolutely explained by age-related physiology and not selective punching. Once you strip away the folklore and look at the actual forensic science, the punching theory isn't forensic evidence, it's just a story. And it was a story that was never supported by the biology, the specialties involved, or the hard data. And here's where it gets even more frustrating. When attorneys finally talked to the forensic anthropologist during the appeals process, he provided a written statement clarifying his testimony. In that statement, he said essentially that while the jury may have left with the impression that he testified there was definitely blunt force trauma, he could not actually make any concrete assertion that the swelling was caused by blunt force, and certainly not that it was caused by a fist. I have questions. Because if you cannot determine whether it was blunt force trauma and you definitely cannot determine whether it was a punch, then why say anything like that on the stand that would lead 12 lay people to believe exactly what you can't say with any definitive confidence?
Yeah, it kind of makes me want to do something with a fist.
Now, to his credit, he did try to walk it back, albeit decades later. And I genuinely do think there is value in experts acknowledging when their testimony may have overstated certainty or crossed disciplinary lines. That's important. Science only works when we correct ourselves. But also, and this is where the gravity hits, Butch Martin spent 24 years wrongfully imprisoned. 24 years away from his family, his life, his freedom. So while oops, my bad is better than silence, it does not begin to cover the consequences.
You should at least make this motherfucker a sandwich.
In science, precision matters. In a courtroom, it can dictate whether someone goes home or goes to prison for life. And in this case, the difference between brain swelling and she was punched unconscious was not just semantic. It was the backbone of the state's entire homicide theory. So at this point, this isn't a case about evidence anymore, because every single piece of scientific evidence the prosecution relied on was later undermined or disproven. That leaves only allegations. Allegations of abuse, allegations of threats, and conflicting accounts from friends and family. Whether those personal allegations are true or false is not for me to decide. I wasn't there, you weren't there, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I have access to the interior of someone's relationship from 1998. But here's what I can say with confidence. With today's advancements in fire science and our much deeper understanding of the physics of fire, we know that the prosecution's fire theory cannot be the way this fire occurred. It just can't. Fire does not travel against a 40-mile-per-hour wind to politely engulf a porch first. It obeys physics, not prosecutorial narrative. With no rational origin and cause theory and zero credible forensic evidence to support intentional fire, the appellate court did exactly what they were obligated to do. They exonerated Butch Martin. I do not believe this fire was arson, not for a moment. What I cannot definitively tell you is whether Butch was or was not an abusive partner to Marcia. That is not a question for fire science. And before you form your opinion here, I highly encourage you to listen to Butch tell his own story on the Wrongful Conviction podcast. Hearing the emotion in his voice as he talks about Marcia and especially about those kids may give you a very different impression than the jurors had back in 1999. What is not up for debate is how tragic this fire was. 3 lives lost: Marcia, Kristin, and Brady. And families on both sides who have spent decades grieving, hurting, and fighting for what they believed was justice. To the family and friends of the victims, our hearts go out to you. It cannot be easy to lose people you love under horrific circumstances and then watch a conviction be overturned. We see you and we empathize deeply with how complicated and painful that must be. And to Butch Martin, based on everything we now know from modern fire science, I do not believe you set that fire. Every credible data point points to an accidental fire, most likely originating at that extension cord on the back porch. Now, I want to know what you think. Leave us an episode comment, message us on social media, or send us an email. And before I go, I want to add an important note. If you or someone you love is experiencing domestic violence, there is help available. You are not alone and you deserve safety and support. In the United States, you can contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE, that's 1-800-799-7233, or text the word START to 88788 to confidentially connect with an advocate. You can also visit thehotline.org for resources and live chat. If you're outside the United States, please search for the local domestic violence resources in your area. And if cases like Butch Martin's make you want to take action, you can help fight wrongful convictions. The Innocence Project and its state-level affiliates work to free the wrongfully convicted and reform the criminal legal system. You can find your state chapter by visiting innocenceproject.org and clicking local organizations. If it's in your budget, consider donating, sharing their work on social media, or signing up for their email updates. Even small amounts of support can help those cases move forward. This has been the fire folklore that convicted Butch Martin on Crime to Burn. My butt is sore from yesterday's workout. Yeah.
It makes you want to crawl right out of my skin.
I shall return with hydration. I have a shadow. It is kitten-shaped. She's growing up really fast.
Same amount of time it takes everybody. You ever doze off and keep typing?
Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
I will actually start typing about what I'm dreaming about. I was writing a paper in college, in grad school, and my economics paper shifted into a talk about me having tea with Madonna.
Yeah, our dreams were different about Madonna.
I think that's the only dream I've ever had about Madonna that I'm aware of.
Your jaw clicked.
It does that a lot. I dislocated it when I was 12. What? Right over my handlebars and landed on my chin. So I have a scar down here.
I think most people from our generation have that scar.
Yeah. When I went to the emergency room, the doctor was like, oh, look, I have a scar there. Actually, this is a scar that was already on top of another scar. Because I jumped into a swimming pool and landed with my chin on top of somebody's head.
Ow.
Yeah. I was okay. I just had a little cut. And we could just steri strip it closed, but she had to have stitches.
In her head?
Yeah, on top of her head.
A sharp chin.
I do.
Or at least you did until then. That's probably blunted it off or something.
It hurt. And like the whole side of her face was just blood. And I was like,
ooh.
Uh-oh. And the lifeguards were all blowing whistles and jumping in the pool. And we were playing this game where we were closing our eyes and walking until we fell in the pool. So I didn't know she was there.
I'm always astonished to find out the games you used to play.
Yeah. Yeah, cut her head open with my chin.
They call her the Iron Chin.
Sorry, Nancy. I split somebody's head open, and I've split my own head open several times. Has anyone ever, injured me in a way that required medical intervention? I don't know that I think I only injured myself and others.
That makes you dangerous.
Yeah.
Which is why you have to be supervised.
I should come with a warning label. The reason I got a concussion the very first time I got a concussion was because I was laughing at misheard song lyrics.
Well, bad lip reading is hilarious.
Well, it was right after we'd had a really big ice storm and everything was covered in 2 inches of ice. And so, of course, what do kids do when there's 2 inches of ice on everything? We go slide down hills. And then we claw our way back up them and slide down them again. Because you didn't need a sled. You could just slide down them on your feet if you were dumb. I was dumb. So we were standing up trying to slide down. We were talking about some song, and the lyrics of the song were, and I love you. And one of my friends thought they were, and apple dapple do. And I started laughing, and I leaned too far back, and my feet slipped out from under me, and I cracked my head on the ice.
Owie.
And so, I made my way home crying. And then I was sitting there, and my dad was like, oh, you got a goose egg. It's okay. Kids hit their heads. And then I was just staring off into space later. And he was like, what's wrong? And I was like, nothing feels real. I feel like I'm in a dream. And he was like, get in the car. We skated to the hospital in a Buick on 2 inches of ice. And sure enough, I had a concussion.
That explains why you like all the murder stories. I was like, well, maybe when you get your pants, you'll feel less anxiety, but you already got them. You're destroying the planet.
I'm sorry. The fire baton didn't come with any disclaimers.
It didn't even come with instructions.
It's just, here's a thing to twirl fire around and potentially injure yourself. We're not going to tell you what fuels to use. We're not going to provide any disclaimers.
We're not going to say a thing about what this is or what it does.
We're going to give you a
Here you are, though.
Flaming stick. Try not to hurt yourself. They didn't even say to try not to hurt yourself.
It's not flaming when it comes to you, though.
No, but it's that the intention is for it to be flaming stick. And it was listed as something for beginners. So I'm like, you would think that they would want beginners to have a little more instruction and
just light it on fire and go for it.
Well, because somebody's going to stick that thing in gasoline.
Someone's going to stick it in their butt, but that's neither here nor there.
So what I'm saying is, if you're going to buy a fire baton on Amazon, be cautious. They don't come with instructions.
No sour cream for you.
You're going to be able to survive a day without sour cream, I promise. Besides, the potato chips she has are sour cream and cheddar flavor. They don't need extra sour cream.
She likes it, though.
For most people, sour cream is a condiment. For our child, sour cream is an entree.
It's a whole food group.
It's like a trapezoid of doom. We'll start a GoFundMe for court records and heating bills.
And I'm your pal Beaver Noodle. Hintity hint hint. Your nipples don't have anything to say except to me, I hope.
It's not pointing to my nipples.
Not now. It's great. Not now. It's perfect. Now it's perfect. You overcorrected from the forehead to the nipples.
And I'm one bad decision away from becoming really interesting. Because you can't have an arson-murder without arson. No, that doesn't even make sense. Who wrote this?
Boy, oh boy. You can't have one thing without the other thing.
Then in court, Korn was confronted with a list of more than 200 I just forgot a word.
You look like you just did a hard restart.
Patents, that's what I was trying to think of. Daddy's down with the sickness, isn't he?
It's not Korn, that's Disturbed.
Oh, sorry.
I may be a little disturbed, though.
But here's the catch, and it didn't come out. Here's the catch is in my brain.
Mm-hmm. It didn't come out.
Your hand gestures there made me real nervous. But wait, what about the forensic? What about the forensic anthropologist? I create enough complications for myself. We're already getting rid of the chairs, y'all. We're at the beer refill and get rid of the chairs phase of this podcast.
No, that's a space herpy.
I do not have space herpes.
Are you sure?
Yep.
You know what they are?
Nope.
How do you know?
I'm just confident.
I'm going to keep my eye on you.
Ruled the deaths the risotto.
Death by risotto. That's how I want to go.
You see, Dr. David Hoblet, the medical examiner who... Yeah. I like saying his name.
It's like a little hob.
The anthropologist wasn't qualified to diagnose I'm going to do this.
I'm going to watch you.
I can see one of your nipples through your shirt.
Are you underestimating my nipples? Or are you overestimating them? Is that doing something for you?
No, not really, but I just thought I'd point it out.
Well then, f*** you, I'm putting on a sweater.
Every time I hear someone say allegedly, I think of Rhoda from the Facebook Live fire.
Yeah, allegedly.
I love her. I think of her so often.
I want to buy her a drink so bad.
I don't even know where you'd find a kazoo therapist.
I mean, like, every kazoo counselor must effing blow.
This episode is brought to you by kazoos, because sometimes words just aren't shrill enough.
Yeah, sometimes your words need to vibrate a little bit more.
Kazoos are like weaponized whimsy at 110 decibels. This episode's brought to you by the cult of Steve's financial department, which is just me, a ring light, and a couple feet pics.
Hey, you know what grows on your feet sometimes?
Corn?
Corn. Shuck it, baby. Shuck it hard. This concludes our transmission. Steve thanks you for your compliance.
Crime to Burn is a production of Crime to Burn, LLC, where we light fires in your brain and not your buildings. All rights reserved. Still spiritually parched after this episode? It's okay, Steve believes in cross-pollination. Here's a trailer for a show we think deserves to infiltrate your ear holes, in a good way. Don't forget to leave a 5-star review before you go. Steve is watching.
On the morning of July 31st, 2018, 25-year-old Dustin Duthie called 911. To report that he had murdered his girlfriend 6 days before and killed his parents just that very morning. Dustin's girlfriend was my niece, Taylor Toller. Join me, Kim, each Monday as I explore true crime cases with a focus on the victim and try to answer the question of how someone can make the choice to murder another human being. You can find my podcast, A Million Other Choices, wherever you listen to podcasts, including on YouTube.